Welcome to Deep Dive. In this episode, we talk about the sleeping prophet, Edgar Cayce. There's more to learn about him, but we have one source for this deep dive, the true tales from the Edgar Cayce archives. Lives touched and lessons learned from the sleeping prophet by Cayce, Edgar Kirkpatrick, and Nancy Kirkpatrick.
Okay, picture this. You've got this guy, Edgar Cayce. Seems pretty normal, right?
Yeah.
A portrait photographer in rural Kentucky, goes to church, deacon even.
Right, completely unassuming on the surface.
But then there's this other side. He goes into these, well, they called them trances.
A sleep-like state.
And while he's like that, he gives thousands of these readings. I mean, thousands.
It's an astonishing number.
Yeah.
And the content. Medical diagnoses, incredibly detailed stuff, past lives, even prophecies.
Stuff people are still talking about, still debating today.
Absolutely. It really challenges, our usual ideas about what's possible.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that almost unbelievable aspect might be why the origins, the early story, didn't get as much attention for a long time.
Yeah, the whole sleeping prophet image is powerful, but it kind of overshadows the person, doesn't it? The journey he took to get there.
Exactly. It obscures the human story underneath.
And that's what we're really diving into today. We're setting aside the big, famous readings for a bit.
Going back to the beginning.
Yeah, right back to his roots. His childhood, how these abilities, whatever you want to call them, started showing up. We're using biographical accounts to try and piece together the person,
Trying to see it from his perspective and how people around him reacted. Because it must have been bewildering at times.
Totally. So our mission here is really to explore that early life, the unfolding of it all, the human side, the experiences that shaped him, where this incredible and frankly very strange story began.
And the sources we have, the biographies, they paint a pretty vivid picture of that time. Rural Kentucky, late 19th century.
What was it like? Normal kid stuff?
Yeah, a lot of it was, fishing down to the little river, riding horses. He apparently built playhouses with a friend, a boy named Tom. Just typical kid things.
Okay, so a relatable starting point.
But then you also have these moments that aren't so typical, like a tragic accident involving that friend, Tom.
What happened?
The account mentions Edgar was riding behind him, and there was an accident. Tom died. It clearly stayed with Edgar, a powerful early memory.
Wow, yeah. An early brush with mortality. That must have had an impact.
It seems likely. Maybe it fostered a certain sensitivity, something that perhaps played into his later work.
So against this backdrop of normal childhood and this early tragedy, when did the unusual stuff start?
Pretty early on, it seems. We hear about visions, things he saw.
And what did his family think?
Well, his mother, Lulu, apparently told him to keep quiet about them.
Really? Keep them secret?
Yeah, which suggests maybe they weren't comfortable with it, or maybe they just wanted to protect him from, judgment or misunderstanding.
Makes sense. Were there other things besides visions?
The biographies mention other strange and unnerving behaviors. Doesn't always specify what, but enough to unsettle the family.
So not just visions, but other oddities.
Right, like he was just experiencing the world differently somehow, causing a bit of worry, perhaps.
And there was more sadness, too, wasn't there? A younger brother.
Yes, in 1882. Thomas. He was born but died very young.
Oh, that's heartbreaking.
Yeah, and the sources say the family felt this grief very deeply, but they found it hard to even talk about him afterwards, like an unspoken sorrow.
That kind of loss casts a long shadow.
It does. But interestingly, one account hints that this experience, this loss, somehow contributed later to what it calls a life-affirming insight for Edgar.
Huh. Finding meaning even in that.
It seems to be a recurring theme for him. Resilience.
There was also a story about his mother, Lulu, right? Something that stuck with him.
Yes, finding her completely overcome, crying on the cabin floor. Apparently is very out of character for her, this raw display of emotion, and made a huge impression on young Edgar.
Shows the depth of feeling there, the burdens they carried.
Mm-hmm. And even young Edgar seemed to have this unique way of thinking about spiritual things.
Like what?
Like prayer. He didn't just see it as words. He described it as creating, like musical notes, harmonies rising up. He even called Jesus the master musician.
Wow, that's quite poetic for a kid. Very metaphorical.
It really is. Gives you a glimpse into his inner world, doesn't it?
And his mother, Lulu. She sounds complicated. Some descriptions aren't very flattering.
No. Some called her pinched and humorless. But then you see this other side. Deep empathy Like when she took Edgar in because his parents couldn't care for him for a time.
So practical compassion, even if she wasn't outwardly warm all the time.
Seems that way. The family bonds were strong despite the hardships.
Okay, but then there are the accounts that are just hard to explain, like the memory feed.
Oh yeah, the congressional speech. Supposedly he recited a 110-page speech, word for word, after just glancing at it.
Get out. Seriously.
That's the story. And apparently it wasn't just family saying this. The mayor, a U.S. congressman, they supposedly witnessed it.
Okay, that's extraordinary. If true, it points to some kind of unusual mental capacity, way beyond normal.
Definitely an early sign of something remarkable.
And his interest in the Bible, where did that come from?
It was sparked, strangely enough, by a conversation with a local black woodcutter they called Crazy Bill.
Crazy Bill, that's
Yeah, the language reflects the time, obviously. Edgar himself described him as not quite right in the head. We have to acknowledge how dated that sounds now.
Right. But this encounter was important.
Apparently, yes. It ignited this intense interest in the Bible in Edgar, a passion that really stayed with him his whole life and definitely shaped how he later expressed things in the readings.
And the most significant childhood experience, the angel.
That's how it's often described. Seeing this bright figure, maybe an angel, who gave him this message.
What was the message again?
Thy prayers are heard. You will have your wish. Remain faithful. Be true to yourself. Help the sick, the afflicted.
Wow. Heavy stuff for a kid. How did he react?
Couldn't sleep. Had to go outside. It sounds like it hit him profoundly. Like a moment of validation, maybe? Or purpose.
Yeah, like it gave him a framework, a reason for maybe feeling different, a divine nod, perhaps.
Could be. It seems like a really pivotal moment setting a course for what came later.
So, moving on from childhood, what about early relationships outside the family? There was someone named Eddie.
Yes, in Beverly. A long-term connection, but the details are pretty scarce. What's interesting is how reluctant his later family members in Beverly were to talk about Eddie.
Why?
There was this feeling, apparently, that Edgar's abilities, his psychic stuff, had somehow sullied the family name. Even his job as church sexton was something people didn't like to bring up.
So, not everyone was impressed or accepting, even in his own community.
It's not at all. It suggests a real undercurrent of discomfort or even disapproval.
Then he moved to Hopkinsville. That seems like a big shift.
It was. And that's where things really start to change, where he meets Beatrice Coughing.
Right, and this brings in the whole concept of life readings and reincarnation. Can you explain that a bit?
Sure. The idea behind the life readings as they developed was that Cayce, in his trance state, could access information about a person's previous lifetimes.
And this was meant to help them understand their current life.
Exactly. The theory was that relationships, talents, challenges in the present were often rooted in these past experiences. And supposedly, Beatrice's past lives were deeply interwoven with Edgar's.
So like soulmates across time.
That's the implication. A profound, enduring connection.
And the start of her reading was weird.
A little bit, yeah. The voice, the source, apparently first said, "This isn't the name," before correcting itself. But yes, we have the records here of that entity now called Beatrice Coughing.
Huh. Odd. What did the reading say about her?
Described her as very altruistic, a consistent thinker and exponent of all for one and one for all, someone dedicated to service.
Sounds like someone who'd be drawn to his work.
And she was. But interestingly, even though the reading revealed these deep past connections, Edgar was initially quite cautious in his letters to her.
He didn't just spill the beans.
No. He hinted at it, but waited until they met in person. Said he needed to see the truth himself first. It shows he was still processing this information too.
Once they did connect, though, it was a strong bond.
Very. A deep friendship. She and her husband later moved, and Beatrice became really important in founding the ARE, the organization preserving the readings. They even had pet names Eddie and Anna.
Sweet. And her letters showed this connection.
Oh, definitely. Very spiritual, very affectionate. She talked about feeling transported, feeling God's presence when with him. It shows the kind of impact he had on people.
But then physically, things took a bad turn for Edgar.
Yeah, tragically. But 3 years after meeting Beatrice, he had a stroke. Left his whole left side paralyzed.
Wow. That's devastating. It really highlights the physical stresses involved.
Absolutely. His life wasn't easy, even alongside these extraordinary gifts.
Around that time, before the stroke, presumably, he met Dwight L. Moody, the famous evangelist.
That's right, around 1898 in Hopkinsville. Moody was holding these huge revival meetings. Very popular, charismatic figure.
And Edgar was drawn to him.
Seems so. Edgar himself was quite tall, striking looking. He was apparently really fascinated by Moody's take on scripture. They had conversations down by the river.
So, still exploring his own faith, engaging with prominent religious figures.
Definitely. He kept asking pastors, including Moody apparently, this one question.
Which was,
Had God ever spoken directly to them?
still seeking that direct connection, wanting to understand how it worked for others, maybe validate his own experiences.
Exactly. A deep yearning there.
Now, let's talk about Gertrude Salter, his future wife. There was this place, the Hill.
Yes. And initially, Edgar's father didn't want him going there, worried about subversive activities, possibly involving Native Americans. Gives you a sense of the local tensions or prejudices, maybe.
But Edgar found out about the Salters anyway.
Yeah, through a teacher, Mary Green. She painted a picture of the Salter family, the father, Sam, Gertrude's mother, being quite political. It sounds like a place with intellectual discussion.
And the family itself, lively.
Seems so. One sister, Kate, brought music and books. Another, Carrie, had lots of suitors. A cultured, busy household. Different from Edgar's background, perhaps.
And Gertrude knew about Edgar's strangeness beforehand.
Apparently, yes. Through a friend, Ethel Duke, and her Aunt Carrie. So she wasn't going in completely blind.
Interesting. And their relationship was described as opposites attract.
Sort of. Him being more excitable, maybe feeling like an outsider. Her being calm from a more genteel background. But they clicked immediately. Had this rapport that apparently saw them through a lot.
And her parents weren't keen at first.
No. They worried about his lack of education, his prospects, his background, typical parental concerns, maybe amplified by his unusual nature.
And Gertrude herself had fears, specifically about his abilities.
A very specific fear that he might end up in the Hopkinsville Asylum, which, kind of chillingly, her own grandfather had built.
Oof, that's heavy. So how did they deal with that?
It led to a condition, a big one. For the first year and a half, and for years after, she insisted, no talk about the psychic stuff. At all.
A complete boundary. That was part of the deal for them to even get together.
Seems like it might have been a requirement for her to consider his proposal in March 1897.
And even then, she hesitated.
Yeah. She told him, "It's true that I love you, but I will have to think about it." He felt like a strange fish, unsure what she'd say.
Understandable. It wasn't a typical courtship.
No. And maybe, deep down, they both knew their life wouldn't be typical either. That there was this unseen other, this source, they would always be part of it.
Okay, so they get together, but the abilities are off limits conversationally. Then comes the incident that leads to the trance voice loss.
Right. Winter of 1900 in Elkton. He took a sedative for a migraine, apparently too strong. It left him semi-conscious, and when he fully came to, his voice was gone. Just gone.
And it stayed gone.
For a long time. Couldn't speak above a whisper. Lost his salesman job. Ended up working in a photo lab darkroom. Very frustrating, debilitating period.
Did they try to fix it?
Yeah, hypnosis was tried. A man named Hart could get him into a trance, and his voice would work fine then.
While in the trance.
Yes. But as soon as he woke up, gone again. Hart thought it was psychosomatic, mostly, but maybe also partly physical, like his vocal cords were constricting when he was awake.
So the mind playing tricks, but with a physical effect. What next?
Someone else named Quackenboss tried. No luck. Which eventually brought Al Lane into the picture.
Lane knew some hypnosis.
A bit, yeah. And he knew Edgar personally. An osteopath, actually. The sources contrast his appearance with his wife's, oddly enough.
And Edgar's condition during this time?
Not good. He lost a lot of weight, called himself a nervous wreck, had to write everything down on a pad.
And Gertrude, how was she coping?
It was hard on her, too. She lost weight, withdrew socially, dropped out of college for a while. A really tough time for both of them.
So this sets the stage for a turning point, right? The situation with Carrie's baby.
Exactly. Gertrude's cousin, Carrie House, her baby, Thomas Jr., was born prematurely in 1909. Very, very ill. Severe spasms, couldn't keep anything down. Critical condition.
And Carrie reached out to Edgar.
Desperately. She had seen Edgar use his trance abilities before, with Al Lane helping, for things like whipping cough. She believed it could work.
She had faith, even if others were skeptical.
Yes. There was even a prior instance where a reading described blood clots in someone's lung and suggested, like state-of-the-art therapy, though it wasn't followed then. So Carrie had reasons to believe.
What about the baby's father, Dr. House?
He was a doctor, very skeptical, thought the baby was going to die. But he agreed to call Edgar, mostly for Carrie's sake.
So Edgar comes to Hopkinsville.
Arrives in a rainstorm, walks into this incredibly tense, worried household.
He must have felt immense pressure.
Oh, absolutely. Huge anxiety. This wasn't just some abstract reading. This was his nephew's life potentially on the line, if he got it wrong.
But Carrie was convinced.
Unwavering faith. She saw Edgar as like a channel for God's help.
And the reading, what happened?
It gave specific treatment advice, and the baby survived, started to improve.
Wow, that must have been profound.
Absolutely life-changing for Edgar. It seemed to prove the potential of his gift in a way nothing else had. He committed then to doing daily readings for people who genuinely needed help.
And this impacted Gertrude, too.
Big time. It was the catalyst, really. Seeing Carrie's faith, seeing the result with Tommy Jr., it eventually opened the door for Gertrude to become his partner in the work, as he called it. She ended up conducting more readings than anyone.
A real turning point. And this led to new collaborations, like with Dr. Ketchum.
Yes, Dr. Wesley Ketchum,
Yeah.
a homeopath from Ohio. Initially skeptical, like many, but became a strong believer after seeing the readings work.
What convinced him?
The case of George Dalton was a big one. Wealthy guy, shattered leg. Doctors wanted to amputate.
But Casey's reading suggested something else.
Yeah, through Ketchum facilitating. Advised this radical procedure, boring holes, inserting nails. Sounds crazy. But Dalton followed it, healed, and walked. Kept those nails in for 17 years.
Okay, that would make you a believer.
Right. Ketchum started giving lectures about it. Word spread. Suddenly, famous people are coming to see Edgar in Bowling Green. Thomas Edison, Nikola Tesla.
Wow, big names. But Edgar had conditions for working with Ketchum.
A very important one. Readings were only for sick people. No exceptions for desperate cases. He'd learned his lesson from trying racetrack readings earlier, which gave him awful migraines and didn't end well. He used the gift ethically.
And Gertrude, was she on board with Ketchum?
She had reservations, especially about Edgar's father, Leslie, getting involved. She didn't trust him financially. And she worried Ketchum was too focused on attracting wealthy clients, potentially neglecting the poor.
What about paying for readings? Was that sorted out?
It was a point of friction. Ketchum felt it was wrong, an interference. But, reality bites. Edgar had a family, expenses. Eventually, some form of payment became necessary.
They even had judges watch a reading to check if it was legal.
Yeah, highlights how strange this all was.
Yeah.
They needed to see if this proposed partnership was even above board.
And the source had a personality sometimes, like the liniment comment.
Yeah. Can't rub it on the inside. Ketchum took things like that as evidence it wasn't some external spirit, but Edgar's own higher self talking, maybe connecting with other unconscious minds.
Interesting interpretation. So the idea for a hospital came up.
Yes, because treating people long distance was hard. Ketchum envisioned a dedicated place. Then Frank Moore, whose niece was helped by a reading, offered the funding.
Seems like a breakthrough.
It should have been. But then arguments started over profit sharing between Moore, Ketchum, and another partner named Noah. Things stalled. Right in the middle of that, Moore hurt his back.
And Edgar gave a reading for him.
An emergency one. Diagnosed uric acid poisoning, warned about potential blindness. Moore's own doctors were doubtful, but Ketchum believed Cayce.
But then amidst all this business stuff, personal tragedy struck again.
Yes, terribly sad. Edgar and Gertrude's infant son, Milton Porter, died just over a month after he was born. The stress of everything, Gertrude's ongoing worries about readings for family. It must have been an awful time.
Unimaginable. And then Gertrude got sick, seriously ill.
Very ill. Possibly tuberculosis, which is often a death sentence then. Edgar was desperate. He finally felt he had to give a reading for her.
And the reading prescribed heroin, among other things.
Yes. Osteopathic adjustments, inhaling certain fumes, diet changes, other drugs, and yes, heroin. Understandably, the other doctors were very concerned about the heroin. Fatal dose territory.
But they went ahead.
Edgar insisted. Ketchum supported him. And the results, according to the accounts, were dramatic.
She recovered.
Apparently so. Bleeding stopped, fever broke, she regained strength, a seemingly miraculous recovery.
Just as the partnership was getting heat.
Exactly. The irony. This incredible success happens right when their whole operation is under scrutiny.
So Ketchum tried to make it look more legitimate, the presentation to lawyers.
Yeah, demonstrating the trans Q&A, but that backfired in a way.
How so?
Because Ketchum then presented a paper about it all at Harvard in 1911. And that really got the attention of Professor Hugo Münsterberg.
The Harvard psychologist. He wasn't a fan of psychic stuff, right?
Not at all. Very critical. He was apparently furious that someone was claiming diagnoses could be made in a hypnotic state. Saw it as undermining legitimate psychology.
So he came to Hopkinsville.
unannounced. There's a suggestion he might have had a personal motive too, maybe hoping Cayce could help with an illness, but also needing to protect his career by debunking him. A conflict.
What happened when he witnessed a reading?
It was for a man named August Bohm, who hadn't said why he was there, and Musterberg's reaction was unexpected.
He didn't debunk him?
No. He apparently said it seemed genuine, encouraged Cayce, but also warned him about Ketchum. Pointed out potential red flags.
Like what?
Like Ketchum doing those racetrack readings again, maybe using the winnings for his new car, and suggested this might be causing Edgar's migraines, basically hinting at exploitation.
So the partnership was doomed.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
It ended acrimoniously, with lawsuits over the photo studio equipment. A messy end.
Okay, so Ketchum's out. What happens next? More challenges, I assume.
Always. His son, Hugh Lynn, had a bad accident. Burned his eye with flash powder trying to photograph a squirrel.
Oh, no. Could Edgar help?
He went into trance, gave a reading, diagnosed it, prescribed tannic acid, keeping him in a dark room, very specific dressing changes.
And it worked.
Hugh Lynn recovered his sight fully. A huge relief for the family, obviously.
Did Hugh Lynn, growing up around all this, ever question it?
Oh, yeah. As he got older, he became more observant, maybe more critical. He noted times the source gave no info, or when predictions like finding buried treasure were just wrong.
So, not infallible.
Definitely not. There's a funny story about digging for pirate gold based on a reading and finding nothing. Though another time, a hunt for doubloons was supposedly successful. Hit or miss.
Did Hugh Lynn share his father's interest in the paranormal, ghosts and things?
He did have his own experience, seeing something inexplicable in Selma. But Edgar was usually reluctant to discuss that kind of thing. And a weird Ouija board incident later made Hugh Lynn pretty cautious about actively seeking out spirits.
Okay. So a new chapter begins with David Kahn.
Right. Kahn initially came as a skeptic, but he witnessed a reading for a Mrs. Delaney, who had this persistent rash.
And the reading helped.
Suggested using black sulfur. She tried it. Rash cleared up. That convinced Kahn. Became a staunch supporter. Interestingly, a previous reading had hinted someone Jewish would become important to the work.
And Kahn got involved. He wasn't just a believer, he participated.
Yes, actively. He started helping conduct the readings. His belief was apparently unwavering, even when his own father had religious objections.
What kind of objections?
Citing the biblical story of Saul and the witch of Endor, that kind of thing. But David wasn't swayed.
Kahn even sought guidance during World War I.
Yeah, while he was in the army. There's an anecdote about his commanding officer being baffled because Kahn somehow knew things he shouldn't have, supposedly thanks to Cayce's guidance.
Edgar's reach even extended to Hollywood, screenplays in trance.
That's the claim. And readings for movie people. A young actress, Etheline Clare, got a start partly through this, though she apparently had regrets later.
Were all the ventures successful? Oil wells?
No, definitely not. Especially when gambling was involved, like with Joe Dickey trying again. That seemed to bring negative consequences. Kahn made a distinction, though using readings to find oil for potential benefit versus just gambling.
Which leads to the Loling, Texas oil venture with Edgar B. Davis.
Exactly. Loling had this local lore about finding oil through faith. Cayce and Kahn went there, met Davis, supposedly predicted by a reading, and did a health reading for Davis's associate.
And then came the oil prediction.
Yeah, a reading indicated a huge deposit, a sea of oil, under the associate's ranch house. Cayce, Kahn, and Davis bonded over shared religious beliefs. The source even said Davis's success came from hearing God's voice and other elementals.
Davis struck oil eventually.
Not right away. He drilled dry wells, had to get financing from Frank Seiberling, the tire magnate. But when he did strike oil, he became incredibly generous, sharing the wealth widely.
Did Cayce advise on the Davis-Seiberling partnership?
Yes. A reading stressed they needed to cooperate fully for it to work.
Did they?
Sadly, no. Their interests diverged. A merger failed. Another reading warned of a serious division. Shows the limits of the guidance if people don't follow it, I guess.
Backtracking a bit, in Selma, where they had the photo studio, there was this spook room.
Haha. Yeah, that's what they call the room where readings happened. Filled with gifts people had sent. Edgar apparently mused about why the source often said "we" at the start of readings, wondered about other influences.
And getting the readings down on paper was hard.
Very. Edgar spoke incredibly fast in trance, complex sentences. They needed a stenographer, advertised the job.
Enter Gladys Davis.
Enter Gladys Davis. Hired as the stenographer. Her first impressions of the Cayces are really valuable, give a sense of their family life. Turns out their families knew each other slightly.
How did she find out about the readings?
Heard about them from a friend. It's interesting to think about the context then. People were exploring all sorts of ideas about health, like Dr. Abrams's controversial theories about the body's electrical nature. Cayce's readings fit into that evolving landscape.
Then came the move to Dayton, Ohio, and the partnership with Edwin Lammers.
Right. Lammers was a wealthy businessman, very interested in esoteric topics, astrology, stuff like that. His home became a new hub.
Did the readings change then, reflecting Lammers' interests?
They started to, yeah. More focus on stars, planets, their influence. The overall theme was often framed as this quest for self-knowledge being a path to finding God.
Reincarnation became more prominent too.
Yes. An early reading mentioned spirits staying near Earth, which might have piqued Lammers' interest. Then came readings confirming Lammers' own supposed past life as a monk.
And Edgar's past lives, Rata in Egypt.
That emerged then too, along with an even earlier one at the creation of man. Life readings were done for Hugh Lynn, Edgar Evans, his other son, noting astrological factors.
And Gladys got a life reading.
Yes, detailing several past lives, including one where she was supposedly in the court of Louis XV at the same time as Edgar.
But this partnership with Lammers didn't end well either.
No, it collapsed. Financial ruin, betrayal, even though the life readings were happening, offering guidance.
What was the point of the life readings then, if not just fascinating stories?
The idea presented was that they weren't just entertainment. They were meant to be like markers on a roadmap, helping people understand current patterns, challenges, talents based on past experiences. The source apparently said true understanding comes from applying that knowledge.
Edgar's own ability was linked to a past life.
Yeah, one in Persia, supposedly.
Were there warnings in Lammers' readings about the partnership failing?
Apparently, yes. Hints about destructive purposes, needing to learn from past betrayals, like a story involving Hector in Troy. But the warnings weren't heeded, it seems.
Leaving the Cayces struggling financially again.
Yes, hardship in Dayton, and Gladys's role, transcribing, supporting, became even more crucial.
The bond between Edgar and Gladys seems really central here. Her life reading revealed more connections.
Yes, another past life, intertwined again. Multiple readings stress this incredibly deep connection between them, ever been together, as one in mind, soul, spirit, body. Really intense language.
Emphasizing their shared purpose in the work.
Definitely. And they felt it too, apparently. The strong desire to be near each other.
Gladys had health issues too.
She did. Serious ones. Uterine cancer was suspected, potentially linked to stress. Readings recommended exercises, meditation therapy. Edgar clearly cared very deeply for her.
So, needing stability after the Lammers disaster, they sought a manager. And the source named Morton Blumenthal.
Exactly. Blumenthal was a New York stockbroker, seemed like the perfect fit. He was enthusiastic, provided financial backing.
Leading to the move to Virginia Beach.
September 1925. It was pretty desolate in the off-season back then. But they had big plans. The Cayce Hospital for Research and Enlightenment, Dr. House and Curie joined them.
But there was some kind of interruption, a booming voice.
Yeah, a really bizarre incident during a meeting. This loud voice, identified as the Archangel Michael, supposedly filled the room, rattled the windows. Very strange.
And problems started with Morton Blumenthal, too. Over control.
Pretty quickly, yeah. Disagreements about running the hospital, construction. Morton felt since he was funding it, his word was final, foreshadowing trouble. Around this time, Edgar's son, Edgar Evans Cayce, was born. He later became very interested in the Atlantis material.
Atlantis started coming up more then.
Yes. Edgar was looking for ways to fund the hospital, oil, treasure hunting, patents. And Atlantis started featuring first in life readings, then more specifically, Bimini, temples, crystals.
A whole mythology developed.
A very detailed one. The Sons of the Law of One versus the Sons of Belial, the Twilight Crystal, ancient technologies, catastrophes. The idea was that souls who'd lived in Atlantis were now reincarnating and were often exceptional in some way.
And the readings guided inventions, too, like a free energy motor.
Yes, based on visions someone else had after a near-death experience. Cayce gave readings to help develop it. Others got involved. But building a working prototype was a constant struggle. A gravity device was also mentioned.
Tom Sugrue enters the picture around now, the biographer.
Yes. Met Hugh Lynn, ambitious young writer. His own life reading revealed a past connection to Edgar and Hugh Lynn in ancient Egypt, which supposedly explained why he and Hugh Lynn often argued.
He got deeply involved.
Very. Became part of the inner circle, determined to write Edgar's story.
The hospital was actually built.
It was completed. There was a dedication ceremony. Morton gave a moving speech. Plans were even made for Atlantic University on the same campus.
But it struggled financially.
Badly. Poor management, patients not paying bills. Edgar tried to sort it out, even put his father in charge of finances, which probably wasn't the best idea.
And Morton was relying on stock market readings leading up to the crash.
He was. And he later claimed the readings were optimistic. But the actual records, preserved by Gladys, apparently showed warnings about the impending crash that Morton seems to have ignored or downplayed.
There was a spiritual message given to Morton and Edwin Lammers, too.
About their union needing a spiritual basis. But the crash hit Morton hard. He started consulting another psychic. Sugar used the analogy of Rata losing control of the Temple Beautiful in the Atlantis story.
Who was the other psychic? Patricia Devlin.
Yes. Morton claimed he was helping her develop her gift. She gained a lot of influence, got involved with the university.
Causing more conflict.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Disagreements flared among the board. Kahn got a reading warning about Devlin's influence. Edgar refused to bar anyone from readings, citing the example of Jesus and the lepers, help all who ask.
Morton's behavior changed.
Became more controlling after a trip to Europe. The readings gave dire warnings, cooperate, or the partnership would collapse.
It sounds like financial mismanagement continued.
And Morton and Edwin eventually assumed total control of the hospital, putting restrictions on Edgar. Devlin made accusations against Kahn, getting him suspended from readings.
So Blumenthal took over completely.
By court order, yes. Gained control of the ARE, suit grew, and the remaining staff lost their jobs.
What happened to the hospital?
The Blumenthals' liquidated assets turned it into different things over the years. A club, apartments. Hugh Lynn eventually managed to reclaim the property much later. Morton and his wife lived out their lives in Virginia Beach.
But the work didn't stop. Kahn stepped in.
David Kahn and other grateful reading recipients rallied. They formed the new Association for Research and Enlightenment, ARE, basically saving the work, preventing the Cayces from having to retreat back to Kentucky in failure.
They raised money.
Enough to buy the Cayces a modest home on Arctic Circle in Virginia Beach, and the readings resumed. Virginia Harding, another supporter, urged Edgar to persevere.
So, new beginnings again. Did Edgar travel much then?
He did some traveling with Mitchell Hastings, another associate, looking for azurite mentioned in readings. Apparently, their psychic connection was strong during these trips.
And he met Eileen Garrett, the famous medium.
Hugh Lynn arranged it. They had very different views on psychic abilities and how they should be used, a contrast in styles.
Was there still that mysterious figure sometimes, the Indian?
Yes, the turbaned East Indian figure reportedly appeared again at key moments. A crystal ball even arrived from India around this time.
Did Edgar ever try to figure out Garrett's source of information?
Hugh Lynn guided him into a trance about it. The response was complex about the soul being a channel, but also influences from other planes. Garrett's own control, an entity called Yuvani, communicated through her, describing Edgar's abilities, even offering help.
Yuvani mentioned Edgar having a past life in India.
Hinted at it, yeah.
Yeah.
And offered assistance through another entity, Halaliel. It's all very layered and complex.
Did the readings always work? Like finding missing people?
No, the case of Ernest Zentgraf showed limitations. Readings couldn't locate him, saying he needed to ask for help himself. Later, a letter arrived from Ernest detailing his own difficult journey and finding faith.
Then came legal trouble. Edgar arrested.
Yeah, Detroit, November 1935. Arrested for fortune-telling, basically, after a complaint. Gladys's sonography notebook was seized as evidence. Edgar, Gertrude, and Gladys were all jailed briefly.
That must have been shocking.
Deeply baffling and upsetting for Edgar, especially his family, being treated like criminals. But even in jail, he apparently used his conscious clairvoyance, seeing things while awake, to tell inmates the real reasons they were locked up.
Conscious clairvoyance. He could do that too.
Sometimes, apparently. Another instance involved warning a woman not to take a car trip. She ignored him. And a relative was tragically killed in an accident on that route. He also made broader world predictions, though we're not diving deep into those today.
There was also the case of Anne Newmark, helped by Kahn.
Yes. A young woman institutionalized for sudden irrational behavior. Kahn funded her move to private care based on her readings advice. She improved significantly, highlighting the importance of the caregiver's attitude, according to the reading.
Family life continued alongside all this. Grandchildren.
Yes, the family grew. Grandchildren were born, bringing joy. There was also the strange case of Faith Harding, the child prophetess, who made remarkable statements seemingly beyond her years.
And readings for politicians. Senator Wheeler.
Burton K. Wheeler. Readings identified a past life as a Roman named Cornelius, suggesting implications if he ran for president. This was during the New Deal era, war looming. Wheeler was anti-war, and despite having opportunities, he chose not to run for president or vice president.
Who is Louise Brigham, another reading recipient?
Yes, an interesting woman who made innovative box furniture. Her readings revealed a past life as Serapha, supposedly an innkeeper's wife in Bethlehem who witnessed the birth of Jesus.
Wow.
Very specific narratives about her experience with Mary and the baby Jesus at the inn. The message for her was ultimately about finding Jesus within.
Okay, nearing the end of his life, the story of George Conjar.
A powerful one. Conjar had advanced tuberculosis, wrote a desperate letter asking for a reading, promising to work for Cayce if cured.
And the reading offered hope?
Yes, described his condition accurately and prescribed specific treatments, inhaling apple brandy fumes, certain supplements, diet, things that sounded unusual.
Did Conjar follow it?
Immediately. His letters back are full of gratitude, describing not just physical improvement, but spiritual growth.
But Edgar himself was getting sick. The strain was too much.
Yes, his health was failing badly. Giving multiple readings a day was taking a huge toll. Gertrude was deeply worried.
But he couldn't stop.
He felt he couldn't turn people away. Poignantly said he'd be killed either way by the work or by the guilt of refusing. He even scheduled a follow-up for Conjar months ahead, offering encouragement.
Did Conjar recover?
Fully. Lived a long, healthy life. A testament to the readings, for him at least.
But Edgar didn't have that same outcome.
No. The toll was too great. His secretary saw him weakening. He made a final trip to a sanitarium. Determined but frail. Stopped to see Beatrice on the way.
He returned home.
Yes, returned home to Virginia Beach, very emotional. And passed away not long after. Born 1877, died January 1945. A life filled with these early psychic glimpses leading to thousands of trance readings.
So wrapping up this deep dive into those early formative years, what are the big takeaways?
Well, you really see the pattern emerge, don't you? These unusual childhood experiences.
Yeah.
The gradual, sometimes difficult development of these abilities.
And the constant push and pull with the people around him, belief, disbelief, fear, support. It was all there.
Exactly. It foreshadows everything that came later. You see the roots of the work, the challenges he'd face, the core themes.
It really brings up the human side, too. His own struggles, the relationships, how these extraordinary gifts unfolded within a very real, often difficult life.
Makes him much more than just a sleeping prophet image.
Which leaves us with a final thought, maybe for you listening. What does this early life tell us about psychic ability itself? Is it born, made, a mix?
And how do those reactions back then, the skepticism, the faith, mirror how society still grapples with the unexplained today? There's so much more in the Cayce archives, the readings themselves still being explored. Food for thought.